The first sound that set everything in motion wasn't sirens. It was the panicked voice of a man begging for his wife's life. Please, she's not breathing. Hurry. The 911 call came just after 2 p.m. on a clear spring afternoon. Within minutes, an ambulance raced down quiet suburban streets, lights flashing, horn blaring. In the back, Dr. Victoria Barnes checked her gear one last time. Oxygen mask, defibrillator pads, IV line. She wasn't just a doctor today. She was a lifeline. A 63-year-old woman was in cardiac arrest, and every passing second cut her survival odds. Before we dive in, comment which country you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The GPS guided them toward Briarwood Gables, one of those exclusive gated communities that bragged about security and order. But for Dr. Victoria, exclusivity meant only one thing: another obstacle between she and the woman she had to save. When the ambulance screeched to a stop at the wrought iron gate, the team expected it to swing open automatically. Instead, a man in a dark vest stepped forward, blocking their way. He looked official at a glance: badge on his belt, tactical gear, radio clipped to his shoulder. But the closer you looked, the faker it became. The vest read HOA Cop. His name was Carl Jennings, and he wasn't a deputy, wasn't even a licensed security guard. He was a self-styled HOA cop, and today he decided rules mattered more than a woman's life. Emergency medical services, the driver shouted, leaning out the window. We need immediate entry. Carl didn't budge. What's the resident's access code? The paramedic blinked. Are you serious? This is a 911 call. Open the gate. Carl folded his arms, smirk plastered across his face. Policy says no entry without a code, no exceptions. Inside the ambulance, Dr. Victoria chest tightened. She knew the math. Every minute they sat here, Helen Brooks' survival chances plummeted. She threw open the door and strode to the gate, voice sharp with urgency. If you don't open this right now, that woman could die. But instead of helping, Carl's hand shot to his taser. A crackle split the air, and in broad daylight, with sirens still wailing, the HOA's enforcer fired. Bolts of electricity slammed into Dr. Victoria's chest. She hit the pavement hard, convulsing as horrified EMTs screamed and scrambled for backup. Behind the gate, Helen Brooks lay unconscious. Time had already run out. The wail of sirens grew louder until two sheriff's cruisers screeched to a halt outside the subdivision gate. Neighbors were already spilling onto porches, whispering about the ambulance and the shouting they'd heard from Helen Parker's house. Deputies rushed inside, finding Dr. Victoria Barnes pale and trembling, her body still aching from the electrical shock. She was kneeling on the floor, one hand pressed against her ribs, refusing to stop supervising compressions. Don't stop CPR, she commanded hoarsely. Not yet. But within minutes, the paramedic beside her shook his head. The monitor gave nothing but a flat line. Helen Parker, wife, mother, neighbor, was pronounced dead at 2:47 p.m. The kitchen fell silent, the air thick with finality. The deputies stood grim-faced as they radioed the coroner. Victoria exhaled shakily, tears stinging her eyes, not just for the life lost, but for the reckless interference that had stolen precious minutes of care. And Carl Jensen? He wasn't apologizing. The self-styled HOA cop stood tall, taser still clipped to his vest like a trophy. She was already gone, he declared flatly. I didn't do anything wrong. This is private property. You people don't understand how this community works. Deputy Morales, a veteran with 20 years on the force, stepped forward. You assaulted a licensed physician during a medical emergency. That's obstruction, that's battery, and that's prison time. Carl scoffed, folding his arms across his chest. Battery? She ignored my orders. The HOA has rules. No outsiders working without clearance. She brought this on herself. Dr. Victoria lifted her head, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. You tased me while I was coming to perform CPR. You stole seconds I could never get back. You don't get to justify that. Deputy Morales motioned Carl toward the door. You're coming with us. But Carl didn't budge. His eyes swept the room, locking on the deputies as if daring them to lay hands on him. You don't know who you're dealing with. I have authority here. HOA security outranks county deputies inside these gates. You'll regret this if you touch me. The arrogance of it made the neighbors outside murmur louder. Cameras were coming out now, phones recording through the iron bars of the gate. A man in a polo shirt whispered, he just tased a doctor, and now he thinks the HOA outranks the sheriff? Deputy Morales had heard enough. He stepped close, voice low and firm. You assaulted an emergency responder in the line of duty. That's a felony under state law. The HOA doesn't give you a badge, and if you resist, it'll only get worse. Still, Carl smirked. You'll be hearing from our lawyers. By the time they escorted him to the patrol car, his swagger had curdled into angry muttering. Behind him, Dr. Victoria sat on the curb, a blanket around her shoulders, watching as the sheet was pulled over Helen Parker's body. The neighborhood would never forget what had just happened at that gate. A life lost, a doctor tasered, and a so-called enforcer who still thought he was untouchable. But federal authorities were already on their way, and Carl was about to learn just how wrong he was. If you're enjoying this HOA story so far, like and subscribe because the story is only going to get better. The news spread faster than the sirens had. By the time Carl Jensen was booked into the county jail, headlines were already exploding online. HOA guard tases doctor during CPR attempt, resident dies. The sheriff's office wasted no time. Assaulting an emergency responder during a 911 call wasn't just a state crime, it carried federal weight. Within 48 hours, U.S. Marshals filed paperwork confirming that Carl would be facing charges of obstruction of medical services, aggravated assault with a weapon, and interference with emergency communications. Each charge carried years, not months, in prison. Dr. Victoria Barnes was called in for formal testimony. Still bruised from the taser prongs, she sat across from investigators and recounted every second. How Helen was still responsive when she arrived for compressions, how Carl stormed her way and stopped her from saving Helen Parker. The Parker family, devastated by Helen's preventable death, filed a $5 million wrongful death lawsuit, naming not just Carl, but the HOA itself. Their attorney stood on the courthouse steps and spoke plainly to the cameras. If Dr. Victoria had been allowed to continue uninterrupted, Helen Parker would be alive today. Instead, a neighborhood security guard with no authority, no training, and no humanity made himself judge, jury, and executioner. We intend to hold every responsible party accountable. Public outrage poured in. Within days, residents across Brookside Estates held emergency meetings. Neighbors who once ignored HOA politics now demanded resignations. Carver and two other board members were subpoenaed, forced to turn over meeting minutes and private communications. Every smug email, every careless order, every suggestion to make examples of homeowners was now federal evidence. Carl sat in jail unrepentant. At arraignment, he claimed, "I was following protocol." She didn't identify herself properly. The courtroom murmured with disbelief. The prosecutor cut him off. "You tased a licensed physician during an active resuscitation. That isn't protocol. That's manslaughter by interference." The judge denied bail. Meanwhile, Dr. Victoria Barnes found herself thrust unwillingly into the public eye. News anchors replayed her body cam footage over and over, her begging Carl to let her go through the moment the taser fired, her body locking up as precious seconds slipped away. Strangers wrote her letters of support, thanking her for standing firm even in the face of brutality. The lawsuit against the HOA picked up speed. Discovery revealed the board had no legitimate security licensing for Carl or his so-called HOA enforcement team. In fact, state regulators confirmed Carl's taser permit had expired nearly a year prior. Every legal corner they'd cut stacked into a mountain of negligence. By the time the federal indictment dropped, Carl faced 35 years maximum for obstruction of medical services and another 15 for aggravated assault. The wrongful death claim looked certain to bankrupt the HOA's insurance policy and strip individual board members of personal assets. And then came the residents' rebellion. A petition swept through Brookside, gathering signatures door to door. Within weeks, the HOA board was dissolved by court order. Control of the neighborhood shifted to a court-appointed property manager until new elections could be held. For the first time, the people who had lived under HOA intimidation felt the leash snap. Dr. Victoria returned quietly to her hospital shifts, but the tragedy lingered. She later told a reporter, "I became a doctor to save lives." That day, one woman died not because of her heart, but because of a man who thought he had power he never earned. No community should ever give that kind of authority to anyone but trained professionals. Justice came in heavy blows. Carl Jensen's trial ended with a guilty verdict on all counts. He was sentenced to 37 years in federal prison. The Parker family received their settlement, money that would never replace Helen, but would strip power from those who had failed her. And the name Brookside Estates HOA became synonymous with the worst abuse of authority imaginable.